let's just get rolling a little bit, Joe. We'll start off with some T-ball questions there, and then we can kind of launch from there. How's that sound?
I'm all for it. Let's go.
Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our AMA. This is the third webinar event that we've done this fall for Quiet Light. It's going to be part of a series that we're doing. For those of you that don't know, Quiet Light is a brokerage. It helps entrepreneurs buy, build, and sell their business for 6, 7, or 8 figures. Big part of what we do is educational. We speak at conferences, we appear on podcasts, we write books, we do guides and other kinds of content. We love working with people, helping founders plan their exit, envision their goals. We were founded in 2006. We're entrepreneur-led and entrepreneur-focused. What do you think about that, Joe? And there's Jason. Welcome, Jason. How are you doing?
Welcome, Jason.
I sincerely apologize. It was, I only use Zoom every single day, so I'm sure you can forgive me.
Well, we're happy to have you.
We're live and everybody can hear and see you now, I think.
Well, terrific. Well, for those of you that don't know, Joe and Jason are our guests today. I am Christopher Moore. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Quiet Light Brokerage. I'm very happy to be your moderator today. Today's guests between them have almost 200 million in sales between the two of them. Is that right, Joe?
That's about right. Yeah. Jason was actually my broker back in 2010.
That's great. Yeah. They're two of the longest tenured advisors at Quiet Light. I have some very fond memories in my early days with the company, being at conferences with you two, playing putt-putt or pop-a-shot and kind of generally goofing off. We've come a long way since those days. They're really fun guys, but as I've gotten to know them, I really appreciate that they're both very principled men. They love serving clients with relentless honesty. I'm very happy to have both of them with us today. First is Joe Valley. He's the Director of Broker Services and co-owner of Quiet Light. He's a sought-after speaker appearing at Brand Accelerator Live, Ecommerce Fuel $1 Billion Summit, and he's also a sought-after podcast guest, being on My First Million from the Hustle, Ecom Crew, The Amazing Seller podcast. Jason is our longest tenured broker. Is that right, Jason? Outside of the owner, Mark Dowse. You've been with us since 2010.
Yep.
He is, this has not apropos to business, but he's also like my relationship guide in all things women. So I love talking about that stuff. But he has founded 7 businesses, raised over $10 million in venture capital. He's the author of Bathrobe Millionaire. Very happy to have both these gentlemen with us. How are you guys doing today?
Great, Chris. Thanks again. Apologies for being late. I think this is the reason why Joe moved into ownership and I stuck with brokering, is because I've got the technical skills of a 100-year-old.
Well, it's no problem there. All right. So let's just start with an easy one. For those of you who are on with us right now, we're very happy to have you. You can submit your questions in the Q&A box. You can type them into the chat window. You can send an email to me, Christopher@quietlightbrokerage.com. A few of them have come in leading up to the AMA via email. Very happy to answer as many questions that we can get to in the next hour. So let's start with like a very easy one. Today's discussion is about increasing the value of your e-commerce business, and what kind of things can hurt that value, what kind of things can increase your valuation. So, and of course, with Quiet Light, our eye is always toward planning your perfect exit. So the first question I'd have is like, when is the right time to sell my business, guys?
Jason and I might have 2 different approaches to that, yet neither is wrong, neither is right. It depends upon the individual. I think as entrepreneurs, we all do what we do, and that runs in cycles. We get shiny object syndrome, and we eventually need to move on to something else. For me, it's roughly every 7 years or so before I have to either do a new iteration of what I'm doing or move on to a new venture. So when the time is right for the individual owner to exit before they get too emotionally burnt down, and when they can achieve their financial goals. It's a simple, broad answer, but you got to figure out how to determine your financial goals in order to exit. Jason, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty accurate. The thing I find is probably at least half of exits are not financially motivated. There's usually something else going on, like Joe said, shiny object syndrome, where you've got another idea, or something personal. You want to buy a house, you want to get married, you want to get divorced, you just had a baby, you want to travel the world. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. If the goal is financial, which for the other half of people, that's it. Let's get the maximum exit. I would say if this is the slope of your profits, you want to sell kind of here before it levels off. I think that would be optimum from a financial perspective.
Great, terrific. Is there anything that buyers really want that will make your business an attractive asset for acquisition?
Oh, we could write a whole book on what buyers want. There's 100 different things. I think in terms of a mindset that e-commerce or just digital entrepreneurs should have when it comes to selling a business is not, how do I maximize the value of the business? Or maybe it is, but it's building a great business for a great buyer to take over at a great price. See, there's three greats in there. It's got to be a win-win for both parties. If you focus on that, you're going to end up learning along the way all the things that buyers want, which is I mean, there's so many things, but it really boils down to you as an owner being a mature business owner, right? I've got gray on my chin, so I could say mature business owner in a light that means not necessarily gray, but a grown-up, right? You're running your books right. You can run reports. You can look at your financials. You could, do year-over-year projections, look in the past, and it really mostly starts with that. Buyers are looking to buy something that's been built with trust by somebody that they do trust, because they're going to stroke a check for 100,000, $500,000, $1 million, 5 million, 10 million, a lot of money. So you've got to build a real business with a mature mentality, I think, more than anything else.
Do people still stroke checks? That's still a thing that people do.
It's an old saying. I actually paid a contractor with the check today. It was really weird. It was really weird. Yeah.
I would agree completely with what Joe said about you need to be a mature, and the term I would add is trustworthy person. We end up talking to some wheeler dealer types that are kind of fast talkers, and they speak in acronyms, and you never quite know what the heck you're talking about. Honestly, that stuff doesn't work. Just be real, be honest, admit both the good and the negative about your business, and that builds trust because you're not trying to hide from the truth. As far as what buyers are looking for, like Joe says, it literally fills books, but I think a large part of it depends on the size of the business. If you've got a relatively smaller business that's worth maybe a couple 100,000, I think you're more likely to attract what we call a mom and pop buyer. It might be someone who lives or who's worked in corporate America for a long time that wants to strike out entrepreneurially, and what they may be looking for is handholding, a seller that can really ease them into their first entrepreneurial venture. As you go up the food chain towards bigger businesses that might sell for 5 million or above, it becomes a little bit more financially based. In all cases, having clean financials, good bookkeeping, good tax returns is helpful. One thing I would hope to clarify, because I've actually had conversations in the last couple of days where potential sellers may have had this backwards. At least with most buyers, maybe not all, but with most of them, they're looking more at the bottom line. They're gonna buy your business. They want to get a return on it. They're making that from the profits. The reason I mention this is I speak to some sellers that are focusing more on the top line, and they're driving top line growth at the expense of not having profits. And that can be good if you can show a clear path that all this top line growth, now all you need to do is cut certain expenses and it's going to be profitable. But that's usually not the way that I'm seeing it. Usually the way I'll see it is someone is just trying to get top line growth regardless. And the second that they cut off their marketing, they're going to lose that top line growth. And that kind of defeats the purpose. So the thing I keep in mind is most buyers want to recoup their full investment within a couple of years. You know, realistically, 2 to 4 years, I think, is how quick they expect to get it. You can get there in a variety of ways. If the bottom line is growing really quickly, the buyer may pay you a bigger multiple on the business, but you can still sort of back of the envelope it to figure out that they're going to get a return on their money in a couple of years. So don't neglect profit is the short way of what I'm saying.
Yeah, and those businesses that are focused on the top line would probably be SaaS businesses or subscription businesses. For the most part, if you're selling one-off products, you got to really focus on the bottom line most of the time.
Yeah, as long as it's consistent top line. So if you're running a SaaS business for top line, but your churn is incredible, I think you need to focus on that because it needs to be sustainable as well. What do you think? Okay.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Chris, are you going to direct the questions? It looks like Jose's popped something in the question here as well.
Oh, I'm moderator extraordinaire.
Cool.
I got it all taken care of. For those of you who are joining us late, if you have a question, feel free to pop it into the Q&A window, into the chat box. You can send them to us via email. We'll get to as many as we can. One that came into us via email before the webinar began is from Ethan. He says, my wife and I are starting an e-commerce business after our successful service business that we had for 15 years has been mostly shut down due to COVID. How would you recommend we begin with an eventual exit in mind? What do you think are the most impactful areas to focus on learning as we're new to the e-commerce space?
So we have a tendency to not give advice in regards to this is what you should do in your e-commerce business in terms of sales and marketing, but more of a focus on establishing what buyers want in terms of that trust. So, you know, once you've had some success in terms of sales and you know that this is a business that's going to have some legs, and that could take, you know, a month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, the number one thing you've got to do is what makes most people's eyes bleed, and that's get your financials in order. Start using an e-commerce bookkeeper. Don't try to do it yourself. You've got to do accrual accounting. Yes, accrual accounting. What the hell is that? Look it up. It's not that hard, but hire an e-commerce bookkeeper. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in the daily grind of stuff that makes your eyes bleed, which is accounting. I don't like it. I fell asleep in college in accounting class, but it's essential to building a business of value and instilling confidence in your buyers, and will allow you to focus on growth and understand what that bottom line number is that Jason was talking about a couple of minutes ago. It'll make everything else in your business easier if you outsource that to an e-commerce bookkeeper. We've got 5 or 6 folks that we can refer you out to. Yes, there's that question from anonymous attendee. Chris, how do we share these? I could drop something in, or we could just start dropping names. What's best for you?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to post this to YouTube and Facebook after the fact. We're recording this session. We're going to post it to that. We'll put links to everything that we mention in there as well. So you can mention them verbally now, and then I will put links to them later.
Seller Accountant, Muse Minded, Cap Forge, Catching Clouds. Who am I missing, Jason? Chuck, you're in there too.
Yeah, that's everyone I could think of as far as bookkeeping.
Yeah, Catching Clouds and Muse Minded is Xero. Cap Forge, Seller Accountant is QuickBooks. If you have a preference for one or the other, take a look at them, and then again, we'll reach out some links as well that we can share.
And to the original question of, you know, we're just getting started with e-commerce. What are some things? I would not have answered this way 2 years ago, and now my answer is changing based on what we're seeing. A couple years ago, I would have said diversify your revenue sources. You know, you've got your Shopify site, you're selling on eBay, you're selling on Amazon. Now we have found a lot of buyers that are rolling up Amazon businesses. So while a couple years ago I would have said, gee, your business is so reliant on Amazon, that's a negative. Now I'm thinking of it more as a positive, because there's just so many of these roll-up firms. They all reach out to us. So if you've got a very Amazon-based e-commerce business, you know, we can shop it to cash-ready buyers that are competing with each other. That, you know, that puts upward pressure on pricing, which is good for you as the seller. Would you agree with that, Joe? Or
Yeah. I remember back in 2016 attending a conference, and I was so proud of my little ebook, 10 Steps to Selling Your Amazon Business, had it out there on the table. And Andrew gets up and gives a state of the e-commerce presentation and proudly said that 75% of the attendees did 0 sales on Amazon. And I thought, oh, what a jackass I am. That book isn't worth much. It's completely reversed now. Some of those people in that room are now doing 90% of their revenue on Amazon simply because it's unavoidable. That has instilled confidence in Amazon-based buyers. There are holding companies that are trying to buy them. And that is pushing valuations on strictly Amazon businesses up slightly, right? There was a time when I would literally list them at 2.74, so it would round down to 2.7 online. Now, they can go for much higher than that, depending upon size, of course. But you got to be careful with the idea of it's strictly Amazon. Some of those holding companies, they don't pay so well. They're good at buying businesses that are high risk in 2 ways or high risk in 2 ways. A, Amazon. B, they're comfortable with a business that has a hero SKU, meaning 75% of the revenue is coming from one SKU. Sometimes the average buyer doesn't want that because it's too much risk. The holding company will buy that. They will buy it for mostly cash. They all have funky deals because they come from the private equity world. But they may be able to buy that. Ideally, what we want to do is present it to everyone at the same time. So there's upward pressure, sideways pressure from other buyers that is going to make sure you as a seller get, the true maximum value for the business at the right deal structure.
And that's actually a point that I'm going to tack on to. I think that's one of the biggest values that a broker can bring. I know there's a temptation for some entrepreneurs to try and sell it themselves. And it's not that you don't have the ability. I think what we bring is 13 or 14 years of we've been building a list and a reputation with buyers where we can get your listing, your business in front of a whole bunch of people at once. Nothing will help your sale more than having multiple buyers. And just think about it in terms of if you're selling your house, do you want buyer 1 to show up in June and buyer 2 to show up in July, or do you want them both at the same time? That's your best chance of pushing up the value.
Yeah, let me see if I can address the comment that Chuck just made to everybody without making anyone's eyes bleed. So it's just saying make sure your books are on accrual, not cash. The difference is cash is when you buy the widget. When you place that order in China and you write a check for 30% of it, it's going to show up in that month, and the next percent is going to show up in the next month. Accrual is when you sell that unit, it shows up in that month. The difference is dramatic when it comes to the value of your business. You're being sold as a multiple of discretionary earnings, which is your net income plus your salary, add backs, things of that nature. It's complex. But cash is going to depress your net income. If you run a profit and loss statement now and you have $150,000 in inventory on hand, your cash is going to be depressed by at least that. Whereas if you're running a business on accrual, you're going to have that much higher net income. I've seen it change the value of a company by $250,000. And, simple math is if it changes it by 20,000, that bottom line number, and you're selling at a 3-time multiple, you're losing $60,000 if you're not using accrual accounting. We can flip it to accrual after the fact, but it's not always perfectly accurate. Depends upon the numbers you give us.
And what a lot of us, like Joe said, our eyes bleed when we think too much about accounting. Here's one easy way to remember accrual versus cash. Most of us are familiar with the term COGS. It stands for cost of goods sold. Think about last month on your profit and loss statement. You've got COGS. Does that represent the cost of the goods that you actually sold, or does that represent what you spent on inventory? If you can make it represent the cost of the goods you actually sold, that's accrual basis, which is what Joe is advocating.
The way you've got to do it, guys, is export it, run a P&L on a monthly view and take the COGS, divide it by your total revenue. And if it's about the same percentage every month, that's accrual. If it's up and down, that's cash. It actually has to be landed freight in as well. I'm sorry, Chuck's letting me know not everybody can see his comments, so hope that wasn't too much into the weeds for everybody.
The other thing I'll suggest, just because your QuickBooks report says accrual at the top doesn't mean it's accrual. It depends how your bookkeeper input the data.
Yeah, do the math yourself with a calculator. COGS divided by total revenue. It should be the same percentage, give or take, every month. If it's not, if it's dramatically different, you're on cash, and that's a mistake. Most people make the mistake. I did when I sold my business, and I guarantee you 90% of the people listening right now are probably not using accrual accounting. In fact, I would bet that there's probably at least 50% that are running their business without any accounting software at all on this panel, on this group, not this panel. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, so that seems like a very important thing for people to get in order right off the bat. Okay, so let's, just a quick reminder for everyone, if you're on the call, welcome. Drop your questions into the Q&A box, into the chat window. Happy to answer as many as we can in the hour that we have. Next one comes from Jose. Do we have any international buyers? And if so, how does the process work, and how do the taxes differ for those?
We are
Good question.
getting more, yeah, it depends on the type of business, but yeah, we are getting more and more international buyers, especially with these roll-up firms that we talked about earlier. So it depends what kind of business, but if you're selling on Amazon Germany, Amazon UK, that kind of thing, the short answer is yes, we're seeing more and more buyers, whereas a couple years ago, it was very hard to sell those. As far as the taxes, I mean, that's a really broad question, and it depends on the jurisdiction, and we don't go into tax advice, but I'm curious if Joe wants to comment on the taxes part.
Yeah, Jason is just so playing it safe right there and just, you know, dishing the tax questions off on me. Thanks, Jason. We've sold companies to people all over the world. We've sold companies for people all over the world. And honestly, Jose, I don't think it should matter to you where your buyer lives. The vast majority of the deals are still cash. So it doesn't matter if they live in Canada, Tbilisi, Georgia, or Atlanta, Georgia.
I think he's asking about the taxes for him. If he's US based and is selling an international business.
If the question was if the buyer is international, let us know if we saw that wrong, Jose. I don't think it matters at all to you. You're still selling your business as a US resident. I don't think it matters where the money comes from, but I'm not a tax expert. You want to check with your CPA. I don't think it matters at all, though.
Great, excellent, thanks guys. This next question comes from Mike. He wants to sell an independent mom and pop health and food store cafe that he's owned for 20 years. Sounds like there's a brick and mortar component there. $700K gross in order to move into e-commerce. Can you recommend resources to prepare the brick and mortar for sale? Books in pretty good order, and accountant keeps QuickBooks records up to date.
Yeah, sure. So we're always going to refer you to a local brick and mortar business broker because they're going to have the local buyers for you that are going to be required for your local store. The one thing I would say in regards to your comment there is that your books are in pretty good shape because your accountant keeps QuickBooks records up to date. Accountants, CPAs, in my opinion, are for tax mitigation and tax preparation services only. Bookkeepers are for running, importing your data from wherever it is, from your merchant provider, from your seller account, from wherever, and allowing you to run proper profit and loss statements. So what we often see from CPAs and accountants is that they'll do lump sum inventory adjustments, and you've got inventory in this situation so that they can always move towards tax mitigation at the end of the year. When you're selling your business, that's really not how you want to have them done for the ultimate buyer. But the simple answer to your question is a local brick and mortar business broker is the best way to sell a local business. And you want to maybe do a search in IBBA for that. They'll help you find a good broker, IBBA.
And what one other suggestion, if you don't turn up someone on IBBA, go to bizbuysell.com, do a search in your local area for similar kinds of businesses, and you'll probably pretty quickly figure out who's the local, kind of the right person. And Chris, I also want to make sure you didn't miss, Ethan had a question in there.
Where's that?
Chris is never going to miss anything.
He said,
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. That moved a little bit faster. Yeah, Ethan had a question. Are there any good e-commerce consulting firms? Great, thanks, that you recommend.
All depends upon what you mean by e-commerce consulting. I mean, I don't know if I'd recommend a firm. If it's to help grow your e-commerce business, there's lots of podcasts that you can listen to and mastermind groups that you can join that we've come to know very, very well. You could look at e-commerce fuel. You could go to Ecom Crew and work with Mike Jackness there, Ecom Crew Premium. It's a monthly subscription. And you get, I find the best way to grow is by associating and connecting with people that are doing the same thing. And those groups are the type of things or groups that you can join, whether it's e-commerce fuel, Blue Ribbon Mastermind, Rhodium Weekend, Ecom Crew. You'll be connected with like-minded people that share suggestions on how to grow their e-commerce businesses. And so your consulting, if you will, is a monthly fee to be part of that mastermind group. And then you'll connect with other like-minded people that will tell you exactly what they're doing to grow their business. And you can then grow it and take their ideas or the people that they work with and grow your own business. Let me know if that's what you're looking for, if you're literally looking for an agency to take over your account and help you, and grow it that way.
Joe, are there any agencies that you do recommend for, whether it's Amazon advertising or Facebook or, AdWords or anything?
Yeah, so the agencies are always tough, and we've had a few on the podcast. OMG Commerce is great. Those guys are members of the Blue Ribbon Mastermind group. Chris Brewer and his partner, and so sorry, Brett. I'm forgetting Brett's last name. He's got 7 kids. They're fantastic, both with PPC and YouTube videos, Facebook, all of it. My Amazon guy is actually really good on the Amazon side. We had him on the podcast as well. Stephen, he's great, very helpful.
Stephen Pope, he is terrific.
Stephen Pope, yeah. Great guy, very, very helpful in all regards. Jose, yeah, I'm going to follow up with you. So Jose says, and Chris, we're like stealing your thunder here as moderator. Sorry for being too broad. So I'm evaluating buying a US or European e-commerce business, but I'm not a US citizen. What would be the best way to make the acquisition? Via BVI vehicle? I've just seen very mixed opinions on taxes, so I'm searching for wisdom on the tax part. I don't know if I can give you the wisdom on the tax part. You're going to be, whether you're buying a US or a European business, it might be to get US citizenship. I think that might be what you're referring to. I know there's some opportunities there. We've worked with Red Path Advisors out of Minnesota. They're incredibly good at what they do. They're pretty steep in terms of cost, but you might be able to reach out to them. Red Path Advisors, they may be able to give you some advice on the tax side of things. Any thoughts there, Jason?
Chris, I think you just, no, on the tax front, honestly, it's such an individual kind of thing that really speaking to a tax-only professional makes sense. Chris, were you recommending the bottomlinecpa.com?
Yeah, I'm popping into the chat window different CPA firms that are on our referral list so people can have those. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Jose, really, for this level of specificity, you got to talk to a CPA. They're not going to charge you much for an upfront conversation, but they'll give you much more clear guidance on what it's going to look like for you.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah, Ethan, you're going to check out Blue Ribbon. It's also check out Ecom Crew Premium and E-commerce Fuel. Those are groups that are fantastic in e-commerce. Rhodium Weekend also has e-commerce mixed with content, mixed with affiliate and SaaS owners as well.
Are there minimum sales thresholds that you need to qualify for those, Joe?
Not for Ecom Crew. E-commerce Fuel, there's a minimum as Blue Ribbon Mastermind. I think Blue Ribbon Mastermind would probably, I want to say it might be the most expensive one to join. There's a lot of high level business owners there. There's different levels. I'd say Ecom Crew Premium. It's Mike Jackson's a podcast Ecom Crew, and now he has a mastermind group essentially That would be the first step I'd look at if your business is doing less than $1 million in revenue. And then you could step it up to e-commerce fuel, which Mike is a big part of, and then Blue Ribbon Mastermind as well.
We got a few more in the Q&A, Chris.
Glad to help, Jose.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Okay, so what are the key things to look for in an e-com business for new buyers?
So I think if you're a new buyer and a relatively new entrepreneur, I would suggest that the biggest thing you want to look for is stability. Some ways of gauging stability are, has the business been around for a while? And in e-commerce, that kind of means 2.5 to 3 years sort of constitutes a while. If it's been around longer than that, great. Is it something that requires a lot of technical skills, and or do you have those skills? So for a lot of new buyers, the reason they're doing it is because they just want to move into entrepreneurship. And my thought is, keep it simple, find something that doesn't require too many technical skills. One thing I hear from a lot of new buyers is their personal passion makes a difference. They just don't want to buy a business that's selling something that they don't personally like. For me, I never cared. I was always, you know, kind of agnostic on the business front. But for a lot of people, I think that makes a difference. You want to envision, can I wake up every day and feel excited to fulfill orders or whatever? You know, will get me out of bed. As for, you know, and if you're a buyer, you want to look at the converse of what we're recommending to sellers. Make sure that the bookkeeping is clean enough that you're able to do a diligence and confirm that the seller really did earn what they're representing that they did, because that's the big reason you're buying it. You want to get a return on your investment. So that's pretty important. Joe, the question is, for a new buyer, what would you look for in an e-com business?
Yeah. First and foremost, make sure you like and trust the person who's selling it. And the best way to do that, even though we're all sick of Zoom calls these days, is do a Zoom call. Get to know them over a call like this. You don't make an offer until you speak to them directly, see the whites of their eyes, and ask them honest questions. This is not a Wall Street style negotiation. Do not approach it like that. I remember when I sold my own business and Jason was my advisor back in 2010, we wound up with maybe 4 or 5 calls with buyers in the first 30 days. And one of them was just an asshole, to be blunt, right? And, you know, 15 minutes into the call, I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to sell to this guy. No way. The reverse is true. You can't, well, I guess if you're the person buying, don't be an asshole. Your goal, your objective on conference calls like that should be that at the end of the call, the person who is selling the business thinks to themselves, man, there's no one I want to buy my business except for Patrick or Jose. So that they just love the idea of you being their buyer after that call. They may be talking to 5 other people. At the end of the call, they want you to be their buyer. And then that allows you to present an offer that works for you first and foremost. At the very least, you're going to get a counter. So number 1, don't be an asshole. To Jason's point in regards to, you know, product or industry agnostic, I think that as an entrepreneur, if you're not an entrepreneur yet and you have a goal to be one, you have to understand that you're going to have some pretty grim days. It's just part of the life, right? There are going to be potholes and hurdles and valleys to get through and mountains to climb. And you should like what you're doing, or at least be proud of it, what it is that you're offering people, whether it's a service, a content, or a product, so that you can tell your mother-in-law about it, or your father-in-law or your mother about it. And make sure it's something that's going to have legs and is going to be around a while. You don't want to have that fear of obsolescence where, you know, it's going to disappear in 12 months or 24 months. It's got to have some legs and be around a long time. Don't rush either. There's very little opportunity that you're going to look at 3 businesses and buy one of them. You're going to have to look at 30 of them before you even make an offer on one, I think. The more you look at, the more you're going to know the right fit for you when it comes along and be able to make an offer that's going to work for you and for the buyer. But you got to get your financial ducks in a row as well.
Joe, did you tell your mother-in-law about the sex toys e-commerce business you bought?
Well, I bought it from you, so I told yours.
Uh,
Okay. All right. There we go.
Okay, enough of this shenanigans.
next question is,
Next question from an anonymous attendee says, how are multiples looking these days, depending upon size, industry, et cetera? Any averages you care to share? And I mean, since we're talking specifically e-commerce right now, let's talk about some metrics that drive the multiple size.
Sure. Jason, I'll start and then you pitch in, but
Yeah.
you got to talk about size as you've got there first, Mr. Anonymous attendee. I'd say if you're less than 100,000, you're going to have a certain multiple. Between 100 and 500,000, you're going to creep up on the multiple. 500 to $1 million, you're going to creep up again, and then north of $1 million. So broad strokes. I'll give you the multiples, but the challenge with giving you a multiple is that we haven't defined and won't fully define, because it will truly make your eyes bleed, multiple of what? Okay, it's not a multiple of net income. It's multiple of discretionary earnings. And then you've got to understand, the 7 layers of add backs and things of that nature. But, you're looking, if it's an e-commerce business, whether it's a Shopify store or Amazon or a mix of both, you're probably looking in that, if you're sub $100,000, you're looking in that 2 to 3 time range. If you're 1 to $500,000, you're looking at 2 to 3.5. If you're $500,000 to $1 million, you're looking at still 2 to maybe 4, 4 plus, and then north of $1 million, you're probably that north of 3. And how far up you go greatly depends on a lot of different things in the business. With e-commerce, the way that we talk multiples is always of discretionary earnings. With Quiet Light and everybody else in the industry, except for one brokerage firm out there, we do not include inventory in the purchase price. It's always a multiple of your discretionary earnings, and then plus the landed cost of goods sellable inventory on hand at the time of closing. You paid to ship it from China or Thailand or India or New Jersey to your 3PL or to FBA or to your own warehouse. You should get paid for that as well. So it's the landed cost that you get paid for. There should be no negotiation on that inventory. You should be paid $1 for every dollar that you spent. But those are the broad multiple ranges. And then you get into where in that range you fall depending upon the risk factors, right, Jason?
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with everything Joe said. If I had to summarize, I say e-commerce is kind of a 3X world. What we mean by that is, well, you have to look at the time period that you're basing the multiple on. Generally, it's the last 12 months, what we call the trailing 12. Like Joe said, it's not the net income, it's the net income plus certain things that we're allowed to add back. So if you're the owner operator and you're paying yourself a $50,000 salary, we get to add that salary back. So if your bottom line said 100,000, now it'll say 150, and we put the multiple on that. It's really important, like Joe said, to understand when you're talking to someone, are they including the inventory in the multiple or not? We do not. So it's the number we quote you plus the value of the inventory. At closing, we're doing asset sales. Certain things are going to stay with you as the seller. You're going to keep the cash in the bank. You're going to keep the accounts receivable up to the point of closing. You're going to pay the accounts payable up to the point of closing. So really what you're selling is your website, your Amazon account, your marketing, and your inventory on hand. That's usually what the multiple applies for. The other question becomes, what's a legitimate add back? What's the multiple on? I wouldn't get overly hung up on multiples, because a lot of people are thinking of different things when they just spit out a number. The thing that I tend to think is most buyers want to get a return on their investment within about 3 years. And the best way to find out the honest market price, it's not talking to a bunch of brokers, because we're not the ones buying your business. It's get your business in the hands of someone that can get it in front of a bunch of real buyers at once. Pretty soon, we're going to discover what the market will bear for your business. And you're not under pressure to accept the offer if it's not close to what the broker said. I know, I'm less than perfect. I've been surprised on occasion.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that last part, Jason?
I'm less than perfect.
Okay, just wanted.
And sometimes I've underquoted a business, sometimes I've overquoted. If I underquote, what happens is we tend to get a bidding war and the market will bid it up to fair value. If I overquote, we tend to hear crickets. It tends to scare away the good buyers, and then you end up with low ballers. So the best idea when you're selling is try to price it realistically, because that's going to bring a lot of buyers in at once. If you aim too high, it really can backfire.
Yeah, and I've seen through the years where Jason, he'll price it, he'll do the proper valuation, make the proper suggestion in terms of price, and the person selling the business will be like, yeah, no, that's too low. So and so told me X, and just says, okay, well, give it a shot and we'll be here to help when you come back. And then they come back and they say, yeah, they priced it way up here. The offers came in way down here. Jason will price it right. And the offers come in pretty darn close to right, which are still higher than the lowball offers. I can't say this, talk about this without calling out Chuck, who I know is listening, and he's saying, mention me in his head right now. Now he's probably going to bust my, you know what, in a second here, but Chuck listed something recently and he had a record breaking, I think, Amanda may argue this, but he had 15 offers on a single listing. So the business was, 36 months old, SBA eligible, consistent growth year over year, attractive to a wide variety of buyers. And the owner of the business was trustworthy and their books were in great shape. 15 offers and sold well over asking price. Did Chuck price that right? Some may argue he priced it too low because he got 15 offers. I would argue that he priced it right because there were a lot of buyers knowing it was priced right. And then they fought for each other and they bid it up. Not too much, but they bid it up and ended up with a great buyer. You're welcome, Chuck. He's saying LOL right now.
I think it was 13 offers and it was a tie with Amanda's.
It was 13? I thought it was 15.
It was 13.
All right.
But I could be wrong. I mean, Chuck can prove me wrong on this one.
That was about a $3.5 million business, I think, right?
Yeah.
It was. I do know that the multiple, for everybody that's listening, it was an FBA business, and it was a 3.52 multiple that Chuck listed it at. Okay. Strong multiple. I think the discretionary earnings. You heard my multiple ranges before. Discretionary earnings were less than 500,000, I believe, Chuck. I'm not going to look it up here, but it just had so many attractive features to it that, higher, 700-ish. So 3.5, 700-ish, a lot of attractive features. And I believe it did get over asking price. Okay, on to the next question, Christopher Moore.
Great. So Ethan followed up with a question about the business that they're looking to start. It's a gardening and in the gardening and cooking space. He plans to first build traffic and then add the store on Amazon sales. Have you ever seen that approach be successful? And I don't know if we want to give specific advice about starting a store, but maybe you guys have some thoughts on this. Or would you consider launching sales on that product right away? I mean, product research, I'd imagine first, yeah?
Like you said, we're trying to not to give specific e-commerce advice, but I tell you what you're talking about is exactly what Scott Volker talks about on the Rock That Brand podcast. It talks about building good quality content, building an email list, building trust with that email list so people are following you and paying attention. They love your reviews, they love your product ideas, and then you offer them something. You may start out with affiliate products that you're doing reviews on, and then eventually drop in your own brand, and then eventually just become your own brand that you're selling. That's another one that you could listen to in terms of growing your e-commerce business. It's Rock That Brand, and I believe Scott has some mastermind groups as well. But it seems to be something that works fairly well. It makes a lot of sense, just building trust in a list, and then sharing your products as part of that trust to that list. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds great in theory, and if it works, that's great. I say follow whatever works. I had a really sad conversation with someone the other day where she basically invested her life savings in a business and it wasn't going anywhere. And I told her I couldn't sell it. I didn't see a whole lot of value, and it was a very depressing conversation. So my thought is, you make a plan and try it. So if you think building up the content first and then introducing the products might work, try it. But then be honest with yourself. If the traffic just isn't flowing, try something else. Go ahead and put the product straight on Amazon and see if they're selling. Just keep trying different things. The thing I discovered from, again, I've started 7 businesses. The ones that worked tend to work pretty quickly. I mean, they got profitable, some of them within a day, some of them within a month or 2. The ones where it constantly felt like a struggle, and a year later, you're like, all we have to do is get over that next hill. Those businesses never made it. So, you know, like Mike Tyson says, we all have a plan until we get punched in the face. Get punched early. Be honest with yourself if it's not working, and try something different.
Great new question. Are there any buy-side brokers you can recommend for Ecom? Sorry, Chris, you were just reading that out loud too, weren't you?
The question before that.
I think you guys don't think I can see my screen is what's going on. Like I can see just fine.
We just love flapping our jaws. That's what we love doing. Because I see the question, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to answer that one.
I just like my job so much. I want to actually do it. But you guys,
all right, second anonymous attendee, you got to wait. Chris, read that first question. Would you mind, please?
We have 10 more minutes for all attendees. Thank you so much for being here. Probably time for like 2 or 3 more questions. So if you have a last minute question, go ahead, pop it into the Q&A window. We'll get to it as quickly as we can. Next question is another anonymous attendee. What are the key trends and niches? I say niches because I think I'm very fancy in the e-com space.
What's changed dramatically in terms of trends is that the FBA businesses are not considered as risky as before. And both holding companies and individual buyers love them. And they love them because it's low-hanging fruit. They don't have to, there's a built-in marketplace. You have to know how to sell to them and rank in Amazon and do all of that stuff. But there's, again, tons of masterminds and resources and podcasts out there to help with that. But that's the biggest trend that I'm seeing. Jason?
Yeah, I agreed. And by FBA business, Joe's talking about businesses that sell primarily on Amazon. That has really gone huge. And the one other thing that I think we're seeing is selling private label or proprietary products as opposed to selling commodities. Wouldn't you agree, Joe? 5 years ago, we saw a lot more people selling commodity stuff, and now almost everything is private labeled. Yeah,
resellers or wholesalers, whatever they might be. But yeah, and those businesses are still valuable. The best way to do it is to have a contract and a diversity, meaning you don't have one client that you're reselling for and no contract. It'd be Wozniak's working on one where Eddie, the owner's got, I think, 15 or 16 different wholesalers that he buys from, or clients that he buys from and resells on Amazon. But yeah, have your own brand more than anything else. Diversification is always great, but we're seeing less and less of it. The vast majority of e-commerce businesses are either, sort of all Shopify, meaning all meaning 85, 90%, or all Amazon, meaning 85, 90%. Not a ton of diversification, even when you get to Amazon. It's mostly US stuff.
And as far as the specific niches, you gotta just experiment. It's whatever is selling well, whatever you can sell that sells well and makes a good profit. We're going to find a buyer. We're likely going to find a buyer for your business. But I can't recommend a broad niche like, healthcare or anything like that. Can you, Joe?
No, if it's a good business, there's a buyer out there for it. The same thing with people ask, is there a best time to buy a business, or is there a best time during the year to sell a business? And while there are some times that are busier, first quarter, second quarter, whatever, I believe strongly that if you've got a great business, it's going to sell no matter what time of year. So seasonality doesn't matter much. Chris, I'm going to let you read that question because I'm not going to step on your toes.
You're super excited to answer this, so I'm excited that you're excited. Joe, I think this one's specifically for you because we've had this conversation recently. Are there any Jason can answer as well if he'd like, if he's got any insights, but are there any buy-side brokers you could recommend for e-commerce? Is it very risky for a first-time buyer to try to find the right business to buy a decent-sized business without the help of an expert?
Yeah, so even if you find a buy-side broker, it doesn't mean they're an expert or going to do the right things for you. What you really need is help in the due diligence phase. So you can learn from everything that we do at Quiet Light to get to the point where you're under letter of intent. You can get all the way there. It's once you're under letter of intent that you need to dig in and do your due diligence, verifying all the financials, the traffic, the links, everything about the business that you're buying. And a buy-side broker is not going to help you with that. And a sell-side broker is not going to help you with that. Some people think they're going to hire their CPA, but they don't know anything about e-commerce. I wouldn't do that either. They certainly don't know anything about backlinks and things of that nature. So the place to go to is Centurica.com, Centurica.com, Centurica.com. It's a due diligence firm specializing in online businesses, and it's there for buyers. We have a lot of people that we technically represent sellers only. We have a lot of buyers that come through that hire Centurica for due diligence. I've seen it on $35,000 deals. Chuck and I are working on one now that's 3.7, 3.8 million. And the buyers did it on that one as well. I've sold a company down in Austin. I've sold them 4, Brad sold them, or Mark sold them 1, total of 5 every single time. And this is a Harvard grad. Every single time they hire Centurica to do it. I lost $250,000 in 2012 because I didn't hire somebody to help me. I bought the business from a broker somewhere else in the world, and the seller was somebody else in the world. I didn't do a video call with them. I did everything wrong. And 42 days after I bought it, it got hit by an algorithm update called the Penguin update. This was back in 2012. If I had hired Centurica, I probably would not have bought the business. It's all worked out because I love Quiet Light and what I do, and I can always share that negative experience that I had to help buyers like yourself go in the right direction. But the simple answer is you're going to hunt for the business yourself. You're going to buy it from a sell-side broker that you develop a relationship with and trust, and a firm that you trust. And then once you're under letter of intent, you're going to hire Centurica, hopefully, to help you with due diligence. Then you're going to need an attorney to work on the asset purchase agreements. Your LOI is fully contingent on your own due diligence and that detailed asset purchase agreement. And we can give you some referrals on the attorneys when you get to that point as well.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Joe. Centurica, those guys are pretty smart, and they are there for the buyer. One thing I will caution all first-time buyers is no matter how good the diligence comes out, any business purchase is risky. Joe just gave you a sense of what could happen. Most online businesses are dependent on some form of big brother, whether it's getting traffic for free from Google, getting on the Amazon marketplace. Anytime big brother sneezes, you might get pneumonia. So Amazon could suspend an account for reasons that are beyond your purview, and then you have to fight to get it reinstated. Google could do an algorithm update. So just a couple of things I suggest for first-time buyers is be prepared for ups and downs. It really can be tumultuous, even on a business that passes everything on diligence. And then here's the piece of advice no one has ever listened to me on, and I still say it. You're going to learn, you're going to get your MBA in business buying, whether you buy a big business or a small one. Personally, I recommend start with a small one, learn your lessons, resell it, and then buy a bigger one. Nobody ever listens. Everyone goes straight for the $1 million business. But just from what could I potentially lose? Obviously, the smaller it is, the less you could lose. So
there could be a reason for that, Jason, and that's because why they go for the larger ones. And this is the great thing about the team that we have at Quiet Light. We all have different experiences and often different opinions, and we respect each other. It's like Quiet Light has a board of advisors of incredibly successful entrepreneurs. I look at it a little differently, and I guess there are smaller businesses that are lower risk, and that is, they've got to be well established, an entrepreneur that is running the books right, and there's got to be diversity in revenue and revenue channels. That will all lower the risk. But at the same time, if you're buying that $1 million business, odds are it's more established, it's been around longer, it's got SOPs in place, systems in place, it's had hiccups that the owner has been able to get over and fix. And in many, many ways, the larger listings are less risk than a $100,000 listing. Because the $100,000 ones, odds are it just hadn't been around long enough and there's not as much diversity. But it's all up to the individual. And more than anything else, the risk can be averted by hiring a great due diligence firm. Listen to your gut. if the advisor is trying to sell you something, walk away. They should be presenting good quality information and letting you make the decision. If you don't trust them, don't buy the business.
And it's also okay. So that's fair, and I'll agree with Joe that a lot of the bigger businesses have probably worked out the kinks more. It's also though important to know your own skill set, what you're good at, what you're not, and importantly, your own risk tolerance. I remember a business a number of years ago. I sold this business, was 15 years in the making, had a great brand, all this kind of stuff. The new owners were young, smart MBAs, fresh out of business school. They bought the business. The first thing they did was update this old website. What they forgot to do was consult with an SEO firm who would have told them, don't change the URLs, don't change the landing pages. They ended up losing a ton of ranking in Google. It could have been avoided super easily had they known their limitations. And then also your own risk tolerance. Just think back, how have I reacted in different situations? Is this gonna put too much strain on me emotionally if things don't go according to plan? And it becomes pretty important because there really is a range of, some people are roll the dice, let me go for the biggest thing possible, and you know, issues roll off their back like water off a duck's back. Other people really internalize it. So know yourself, I think, is pretty important.
Yeah, and I think that comes with experience and age. I couldn't agree more. The way I like to do it is phrase it is make sure that you're not promoting yourself to your own level of incompetence. So, you know, that's what those people that bought the business. They thought they knew better on SEO. They did all of these things because they read a blog and they screwed it up royally. So make sure you don't do that. The business that you're buying is being sold, you know, by somebody who's been running it well. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Sit back and pay attention. Watch for 3 to 6 months.
Yes.
Don't go, you know, changing it up. That's what the buyer of my business did. He thought he was smarter, and ultimately he screwed it up. As far as the risk tolerance, 100%. Look, I have been an entrepreneur since, you know, a kid, really, but self-employed fully since 1997. And so when I bought that business in 2012, my risk tolerance was pretty high. I had another business that I was running. I felt pretty good about that. And I was joining the Quiet Light team at the time. And I could afford to lose it. It wasn't my intention to lose that money, trust me. But it wasn't the last opportunity that I could invest in. I talk to a lot of people where they get one shot at it. One shot. You screw it up and you're working for somebody else the rest of your life, or your spouse is going to say, never again. The key is looking at as many listings as possible before you make your decision and pull that trigger. And then doing it only with a firm that you trust. Trust your gut in terms of the red flags and walk away. Don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to get it done. Don't quit your job yet. Buy the business and run it for 6 months before you quit your job. And lastly, hire a good due diligence firm to help you get through the due diligence, because they will create paths to growth for you. They'll tell you everything wrong with the business, and there's something wrong with every business, but they'll tell you what's wrong with it, which is good, because even though it's doing great and running well and producing profit and revenue, there are some things that you can fix, just not for 3 to 6 months. Those paths to growth are built in there for you as well. All right, Chris?
Great, wonderful. Well, we're at about an hour in. I just wanted to get your guys' last thoughts on, maybe we've talked about clean, organized financials and having a good, honest bookkeeper. Other than that, like just really briefly, what is one activity that a seller might think about in the last year leading up to the sale of their business, other than cleaning up their financials, that you think is like the most important activity to keep their hands on the wheel for?
I think in the last year before you sell, you don't want to be changing things up too much. You want to be maximizing the profit, and you can have more ideas for growth, but I wouldn't be spending a whole lot of money on new ideas in the year leading up to the sale.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Especially things that you're going to invest in that won't give you an ROI until well after the business is sold. You're just helping your buyer there, which is okay. But I would always go with the mindset of building a great business for a great buyer to take over at a great price someday. Focus on that, keep that in the forefront of your mind, and you'll end up doing all the other stuff right. But the thing that you can do most 12 months prior to a sale is truly connect with an advisor that can help you reverse engineer a path to the dollar exit that you want. We want you to plan to sell your business, not wake up and decide to sell your business. Because if you wake up and decide to sell your business, I can pretty much guarantee you it's probably not going to be worth what you think it's worth. If you plan it, you'll be able to make sure that you're doing the right things in terms of preparing the business for that buyer to take over at a great price and make the transition great for both you and them.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us today. If people want to reach out to you and get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I think the best way is probably inquiries at quietlightbrokerage.com. That'll come into the general email box, or if you want to reach out to Jason or myself directly, my email address is simply joe@quietlightbrokerage.com.
How about you, Jay?
Jason Y at quietlightbrokerage.com. And over the years, there's probably been 4,000 emails to Jason at Quiet Light that I never saw.
Let's not forget Chucky.
There's 3 Chris's at Quiet Light now, and we all have to have very distinguished emails. So
that's true. Let's not forget Chuck at quietlightbrokerage.com, because he's lurking behind the scenes.
He is. You're right.
And people know that when he lists something, he gets 13 offers and sells it above asking price. So Chuck at quietlightbrokerage.com.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll have more of these events coming up. Listen to Joe on the Quiet Light podcast every Tuesday. Jason, check out his book, Bath Road Millionaire, available in bookstores now. Joe's book isn't coming out till spring 2021, but we'll put links up for that when it becomes available. So much fun hanging out with you guys today. We'll do it again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.